Okay, so this is yet another setup video for my Kyosho Lazer ZX6. Depending on where I go, I'll either run this buggy or my Losi 22.4. So the two main tracks I race at for the indoor season are RCHR and Walkit Hobbies. And at RCHR, I run my Losi. It's more set up for that track, and they carry lots of Losi parts. And at Walkit, a lot more people run Kyoshos at Walkit, so they carry Kyosho parts there. And I run my Lazer there. I have it set up for that track. So I made, I think, at least two prior setup videos for this car to give you guys some idea of what I'm running for setup. And because the box stock setup is, at least for where I race, it's not adequate. So I've had to make a few tweaks here and there. The last setup video I did, I talked about increasing the rear camber gain, so shortening the rear camber links to get more mid-corner steering. It basically loosens the rear up and allows the car to pivot more or rotate more, but it does come at the expense of corner exit stability. And at the time, last week, I had commented that, you know, it wasn't too bad, but it really was. When I go back and look at the video of the A-main that I ran when I made that change, the car was actually quite unstable on corner exit. So, you know, very similar to what I used to do on my B44 to get more steering, increasing rear camber gain. It helps a lot with steering, but it does make the car very squirrely on corner exit. So I've been trying to figure out a way to get more mid-corner steering, or just steering in general, without making the car so loose on corner exit. And what I basically ended up doing was going back to the sort of stock setting for the ball stud on the hub carrier. So instead of using the inner hole, using the outer hole again, but dropping the roll center. Or sorry, raising the roll center. If you raise the roll center, that creates geometric anti-roll. And so instead of the car rolling so much, it'll tend to kind of slide a little bit. So what I did is I just added a 2mm spacer under the rear hub carrier ball stud on either side. Okay, and basically that's all it is. So you use the stock setup for the rear suspension, and you just put 2mm spacer under the ball stud. And then what I also did is I did this actually a while ago, the shock to the outer hole on the rear tower. And that's the only thing on the rear that's different from stock. Oh, also, sorry, there's a third thing I did. I moved the rear hub carriers back. So the stock setting puts, I think, a 1mm spacer in front and one in the rear, so the hub carrier's in the middle. I moved it all the way back to push some weight forward. That'll give me a little bit more steering. So by raising the roll center and keeping the camber gain low, so a long camber link, it allows you to similarly rotate the car. The car will slide a little bit when you need it to, but on corner exit, when the car squats down, because the camber gain is lower, you get more contact patch between the rear tires and the track surface. So the car is more stable on corner exit, and you get a similar kind of rotation effect mid-corner. Not exactly the same as increasing the rear camber gain, but it's similar. So I found this to be a pretty good balance for me, at least in terms of setting up the rear for the particular track that I race on, and I'm pretty happy with it. You could similarly just go to it like a thicker rear sway bar. So just use, you know, the complete stock rear suspension setup with the shock angle, you know, with the shock position and the ball studs and everything. Just go completely stock and just use a thicker sway bar. But I don't have the sway bar kit. I never bought it. And the rear sway bar is actually, you know, rather thin, the one that comes with the kit. So if you just went to a thicker sway bar, that would also, you know, create a similar effect. It would allow the rear to roll a little bit more. So you can either do that, or you can just, you know, put, say, 2mm of spacers under this ball stud and stand the shocks up a bit, and that'll make the car sort of a little stiffer effectively in the rear during cornering, okay? On the front, I didn't change anything. I did experiment a little bit with bump steer and some Ackerman and roll center settings, but basically I'm at the same point where I was with the camber and steering geometry that I was with the last video. So what that means is, let me make sure I got this right. On the, you know, inner ball stud here, I moved it to the outer hole, added 2mm of spacers, And I have 0 millimeters of Ackerman spacers here. So this is maximum Ackerman. When I first got the car, I thought it had too much steering, but that's really because the rear was too loose. So I took Ackerman away. Then I put it back to get more steering. So lower roll center at the front, maximum Ackerman, kind of a higher roll center at the rear. So this is a fairly, nimble car. It will corner a lot. And in addition to that, I went back to the outer hole here on the front arm. Previously, I was in the middle hole, and I was there so that I can get more droop on the arm. But I found that even when I did that, the front tended to bottom out a lot on jump landings. And I actually, completely wore down the front bumper. I had to get a new bumper. And it also, wore down a lot of this surface here on the chassis. So what I figured I'd do is, okay, let me increase the shock angle, right? So go back to the outer hole, and then to recover droop, to get this, the same or more down travel on the arm, I changed the shock end, right? So the manual tells you to use the short sort of shock end here on the front shock. And that's one reason why, the droop is a little bit on the low side when you run the outer hole. So I just took that off and used the long end, because the parts tree you get has a short, medium, and long shock end. So I just put the long one on, and then, readjusted the collar here, the spring collar, to get, the same ride height I had before, 22 millimeters. And that made a huge difference. There's one particular jump where when I landed it in the past, the front would just constantly dig in. It would bounce. But with this setup here, it was a lot better, not only because I can get similar droop, but because the shock angle is more laid down on vertical landings. The shock is effectively stiffer. Okay, so I get better absorption of the energy of the landing off the jump. So I never really bottomed out that much. Right? You can see this bumper has a very relatively small amount of wear, considering the layout I was running on. So I'm quite happy with this setup here. This is definitely, I'd say, the best that I've had it. So with the shock angle, the roll center, the Ackerman's just the stock Ackerman and stock bump steer setting, so don't change that. I went to the 10-degree caster blocks, right? You get a 7 and a 10-degree caster block. Stock setup's 7 degrees. I went to 10 degree. That gives you a little bit more mid-corner steering, because the wheel kind of cambers over more during cornering. And I think that's pretty much it. So try that setup. What else do I have? I think I have 40 weight front oil, 30 weight rear oil, 4 by 1.3 millimeter pistons all around. It's a pretty stiff setup for the front, but again, I found the front really bottoming out quite a lot with the stock setup, so I had to go kind of heavy up there. And the way that I have the car set up, right, I have the motor up front, so there's more weight up front anyway, so I need a stiffer front setting. So overall, obviously I really like this buggy. It's a great buggy to drive. It probably drives just as well as my Losi 22.4, except I don't have belt issues with this. Yeah, so that's the setup as it is right now, and I don't imagine I'll be changing it in the near future. So I would recommend using this setup as a baseline for like a smooth track that's, say, medium grip. Give it a try, okay? And thanks for watching.